And if the chosen one felt rejected by the very place that promised to shelter them, have you ever looked around in church, in your spiritual community, and felt like no one truly saw you? Not your gifts, not your fire, not your hunger for something more. Have you ever felt like your presence made others uncomfortable? Not because you were lost, but because you were waking up? If that hit something deep inside you, stay here. You didn't find this video by accident. There is a silent exodus happening right now, and it's not about rebellion. It's about revelation. It's about the ones who prayed harder, fasted longer, believed deeper, and still felt like outsiders. It's about the chosen ones, the ones with eyes to see beyond tradition, the ones who weren't called to warm pews but to shake foundations. In this very moment, thousands of people are stepping out of religious systems not because they lost their faith, but because their faith became too big for the walls around them. Their hearts began to burn for something real, something divine, something alive. They saw visions. They received signs. They began hearing God in the quiet, and suddenly the noise of religion became deafening. Spiritual awakening, divine calling, purpose, the path of the chosen. These are not just buzzwords. These are the echoes inside your soul that refuse to be silenced. You know there's something different about you. You've always known. But every time you tried to explain, you were told to calm down, to stay in line, to just have faith. But what if I told you that your restlessness isn't rebellion, it's revelation? What if your discomfort was never a curse, but a compass? There's a reason you've been feeling isolated. There's a reason you've been questioning everything. And there's a reason you found this message right now. The truth is, many of the chosen ones are being called out of religious structures, not away from God, but toward Him, closer, deeper, more awake than ever. This isn't about hating the church. It's about hearing God more clearly than ever, and realizing He's been calling you into a new dimension of faith, into spiritual transformation, into a path where divine signs, spiritual gifts, and supernatural revelation are not just real, they're part of your everyday reality. You're not crazy, you're not alone, and you're definitely not backsliding. You're awakening, and when you awaken, things break, systems tremble, people get uncomfortable, not because you're wrong, but because you're ahead. That's why so many chosen ones are misunderstood. That's why they suffer. That's why they walk alone. But what if walking alone was never the punishment, but the preparation? Stay here, because in this video we're not just talking about leaving church. We're exposing the reason behind the separation. We're opening up the conversation no one dares to speak. And by the end, you'll understand why your spiritual isolation has a divine design. So don't click away. If you've ever felt spiritually homeless, if you've ever cried out to God and wondered why your soul doesn't fit where it used to, if you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stay with me until the end. Because what I'm about to reveal could completely shift your understanding of purpose, identity, and your place in the divine plan. This is more than a message. This is a spiritual transmission. And if the chosen one was you, but before we go any deeper, I need you to do something powerful. Click like, subscribe to this channel, and comment below. I am the chosen one. If you've ever felt this calling, if your soul has been whispering that you're different, that you're here for something divine, this is your confirmation. Your comment isn't just words. It's a signal to YouTube that this awakening is real, that this community exists, that the chosen ones are rising. Let's show the algorithm what happens when the spiritually awakened unite. Now, back to the truth they never told you. Ever since you were a child, something felt different. It wasn't just your imagination. There were signs, subtle but undeniable. You remember them, don't you? That number that kept following you, 1111. The sudden chills at moments that no one else seemed to notice. The dreams, the way people looked at you, like you didn't quite fit in, like you were carrying something invisible they couldn't name, something sacred. You didn't understand it fully back then, but now you know. That was the beginning of your spiritual calling, the beginning of the awakening. You were being chosen, not by man, not by institutions, but by something far greater. And you carried that awareness in silence, because trying to explain it made people uncomfortable, even in the one place that was supposed to understand, the church. At first, you thought you were the problem. You kept showing up, serving, worshiping, sitting quietly, hoping that eventually the unease would pass. But it didn't. In fact, it grew. Something inside you kept whispering, "There's more." Not rebellion, not pride, just more. A deeper hunger, a spiritual thirst that religion couldn't quench anymore. And then came the moment, that invisible turning point. Maybe it was during a sermon that felt hollow, or maybe it was a side glance, a subtle judgment, a phrase like, "He's different now," or "She's drifting." Maybe someone said you were too spiritual, too emotional, or too intense. Whatever it was, it cracked something open inside you, and you realized, it's not me that's out of place. It's this system that can no longer contain who I'm becoming. You didn't leave God. You never could. What you left behind was the shell, the human structure that couldn't recognize your frequency anymore. The building with stained glass but clouded vision. The pews filled with people who didn't see that your fire wasn't burning out. It was evolving. You left the place, but not the presence. In fact, you started feeling closer to the divine than ever before. This is the path of the chosen ones. It's not easy. It's not glamorous. But it's real. And the moment you took your first step outside that door, you weren't stepping away. You were stepping deeper into truth, into faith outside religion, into a personal walk with God so raw and intimate that no one else could define it for you again. And even though it hurt, the stares, the silence, the subtle exile, you knew this was never about fitting in. It was about following the sound of the one who called you before the world had names for your gift. And you keep walking, even when it's lonely, especially when it's lonely, because that's when you hear him the clearest. Some of you watching this right now are still in that tension, still showing up in places your soul already left, still hoping to be seen, to be understood, to be welcomed. But deep down, you know, something is about to shift. And if you've already lived that moment, that quiet exodus, I want to hear from you. Drop in the comments. How old were you when you first felt the calling? Because this isn't just a video, it's a gathering place for the scattered, for the misunderstood, for the spiritually awakened who were never meant to stay hidden. You still love God. That never changed, and it never will. But somewhere along the way, the space that once felt sacred began to feel suffocating. You'd sit there, surrounded by the sound of worship, but something felt hollow. Not because you lacked faith, but because the presence you once encountered so freely had now been replaced by pressure. Pressure to conform, pressure to perform, pressure to fit into a mold that never matched the shape of your soul. And it's not that you became rebellious. It's not that you stopped believing. In fact, your faith grew stronger, but it outgrew the box it was kept in. You started asking questions that had no room on the Sunday morning script. You began to see beyond the repetition of words. You started noticing how ritual replaced relationship, how some sermons had more fear than freedom, more guilt than grace. You remember the moment it shifted. Maybe it was the way someone looked at you when you shared your dream, or the way your curiosity was labeled as dangerous. Maybe it was the whisper you overheard, "She's drifting," or the day you sat in silence, not because you didn't want to sing, but because the words no longer aligned with what you knew in your spirit. That was the moment you realized, this isn't what faith was supposed to feel like. What they called faithfulness, you felt as imprisonment. You weren't turning your back on Jesus. You were finally walking toward him without a leash. There's a massive difference between loving God and submitting to religious control. That's what so many don't understand. They ask, why did you stop going to church? But the real question should be, why are you still expected to worship in a place that no longer allows you to breathe? You didn't stop having faith. You just stopped participating in a version of faith that demanded your silence in exchange for belonging. You were never meant to be a copy. You were never meant to dim your fire to make others feel comfortable. That's not freedom. That's spiritual survival. And your soul wasn't created to just survive. It was created to awaken. You realized you could be spiritual but not religious. You discovered that the true freedom in Christ is felt not behind stained glass, but in the stillness of your room, in the quiet of nature, in the echo of your own spirit rising. You found peace outside of programs, and clarity outside of titles. You found the real Jesus, not the one filtered through agendas and performance, but the one who met people in the margins, outside the temple, in their rawest moments. Now, you walk with him, not behind a pulpit, not under a label, but with confidence. There's no more shame, no more trying to shrink into someone else's definition of devotion. The light you now carry is no longer hidden under church expectations. It shines freely, unfiltered, divine. And as you walk, there's a glow around you. Golden light, truth, liberation. If you're in this process right now, if you're somewhere between holding on and letting go, between loyalty and liberation, know this: you're not alone. There are thousands like you, awakening, breaking free, rising. If that's you, if you feel it burning inside, I want you to drop the word freedom in the comments right now, because that one word says everything. And what comes next will explain why stepping out was never the end of your faith, but the beginning of something so much deeper. When you finally stepped away, most people thought you were walking out, but in truth, you were walking into something deeper, older, sacred. This wasn't you giving up. This was you waking up. Because the chosen ones don't just leave, they awaken. They stop chasing approval and start following alignment. And with that awakening, the signs intensify. You're not imagining it. The recurring dreams, the moments of stillness where the world seems to pause and your chest tightens as if something greater is calling your name. The numbers, always those numbers. 1111, 444, 333, flashing on clocks, receipts, buildings. You didn't plan it, but they always appear. Symbols, patterns, divine interruptions, little breadcrumbs left behind by the Creator, guiding you toward the reason you were born. This is not coincidence. This is confirmation. And then, the people start showing up. Not crowds, but chosen encounters. Conversations that feel scripted by heaven. Random strangers saying things your heart was desperate to hear. Songs that play at the exact moment your soul needs them. Every detail starts to whisper the same truth. You were never abandoned. You were being prepared. Because in this new covenant, you realize something powerful. The promise you were chasing inside religion was never theirs to give you. That light, that fire, that feeling of divine purpose, it was never locked inside a building. It was never reserved for titles, robes, pulpits. It was yours from the beginning. What the institution tried to gatekeep, heaven placed in your DNA. And now that you're no longer sitting behind those walls, you can see it clearly. The people who once had power over your beliefs are no longer between you and your Creator. There is no more filter, just presence, just intimacy, just truth. This is the awakening journey. You begin to understand that you weren't kicked out. You were called out. You weren't denied. You were distinguished. You weren't abandoned. You were anointed. The exile they spoke over you was actually your elevation. You opened the gate to your own destiny. And it's terrifying. And it's thrilling. And it's real. This new path doesn't come with maps, but it comes with meaning. It doesn't promise comfort, but it offers clarity. You no longer walk to be seen. You walk to become. And as you become, you start to see signs not just in the world, but within yourself. Spiritual downloads, sudden ideas that feel like divine instruction, moments of stillness that carry the weight of prophecy. You are now living in communion, not with a structure, but with the source. And there's no going back, because now you know too much. You've seen too much. You've felt too much. You've tasted freedom. And for the chosen ones, once you taste it, nothing else satisfies. So when people ask, how did you get here? The answer isn't rebellion, it's revelation. You were never running from God. You were running toward Him, in the only direction your soul could go. Forward, into calling, into fire, into the arms of a Father who doesn't need stained glass to speak. You are part of something much bigger now. This isn't religion. This is return. This is restoration. This is remembrance of who you were before they told you who you had to be. This is the promise rising inside your bones. This is where the journey truly begins. And in the next moment, you're going to see what no one dared to tell you about this so-called expulsion, and why being cast out may have been the greatest act of divine protection in your life. And that's when it hits you, like a soft explosion of clarity deep in your chest. This was never a rejection. It was a redirection. You weren't cast out. You were called out. The expulsion you feared was actually the invitation you were praying for. Because what man tried to exclude, God included in something far greater, far older, far more sacred than any system could ever hold. The moment you stepped away wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And as painful as it was, you now see the beauty in that spiritual rupture. That crack in the wall became a portal, a doorway into the unknown. Yes, but also into the undeniable, into a deeper walk, a purer connection, a direct encounter with the divine frequency of the chosen ones. You've realized something now. We don't gather in buildings, we gather in vibration. We meet in alignment, in synchronicity, in the space between one spiritual awakening and the next. We're not bound by stained glass and Sunday schedules. We are tied together by purpose, vision, and spiritual fire. This channel, this exact moment right now, is your confirmation. You didn't land here by accident. You were guided, pulled, drawn by the same force that has been calling your name in dreams, in numbers, in whispers you couldn't explain, because the chosen ones recognize each other, not by face, but by frequency, and you've felt it, haven't you? That sense of finally, someone understands. That's not just relief, that's remembrance. This space is more than content. It's a sanctuary for the spiritually scattered, a place for those who couldn't find themselves in the systems but found their voice in the silence. And now that you're here, the choice becomes clear. Stay clinging to what once held you, or rise into what is now calling you. We are building something here, not just an audience, but a movement of awakened souls. People who know they're different, people who feel they've been set apart, people who understand that the call is costly, but the cost is worth it. And if your heart is beating faster right now, if your skin is tingling, that's not emotion, that's recognition. Your spirit is resonating with truth, because now you know. You were never left behind. You were always meant to lead the way. And just when you think this journey couldn't get deeper, it does. Because in the next video, we're going even further. We're going back, all the way to the beginning. We'll uncover the childhood signs most people overlook. You'll finally understand why you always felt different as a kid, why you saw things, knew things, dreamed differently. That next video is called Chosen Ones, Childhood Signs That You Were Marked from the Beginning. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one. But before we go, I want to ask something from you, and I don't ask lightly. I ask because we are building this together. If this video spoke to your soul, click like right now. Share it with someone you know has felt this, someone silent but chosen. Subscribe and turn on the bell, not just to follow, but to be part of this frequency that we're creating. And in the comments, I want to see a wave of light rise together. Drop the words, I chose the light. Write it, feel it, claim it. Because that one sentence tells YouTube and the universe that we're here, that the chosen ones are waking up, and we're not hiding anymore. This isn't the end. This is where it all begins. Click the next video that's on your screen right now. Each one brings you closer to truth, to clarity, to calling. And remember this, no matter how alone you felt, you were never alone.